Hello, my name is Julie Fry and I'm the curator at Stan Hywet Hall and Gardens. 2023 marks the 125th anniversary of the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company. In recognition of this tremendous achievement, we are issuing a 10-part video series, one each month beginning in March and running through the rest of the year. The Goodyear Tire Rubber Company was founded by F.A. and his brother C.W. Seiberling. F.A. and his wife Gertrude Seiberling are also responsible for the conception and creation of Stan Hywet Hall and Gardens, their family home for 40 years. In this month's episode, we're going to be talking about two events that occurred in the spring of 1913 that had a tremendous impact on the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company. The first occurred at the end of February. A strike broke out across the city of Akron in many of the rubber companies at that time. It started in the Firestone factory when that company made the decision to reduce their piece work rate by 35 cents. At that point, most rubber workers were not paid by the day or by the week. They were paid by the piece. So the more that you produced, the more tires you made or whatever your function was in that factory line, the more you would get paid. So it incentivized rapid production. The Firestone workers decided on a walkout to protest the decrease in their wages, and it soon spread to all of the other rubber companies in Akron. By the end of the week, over 10,000 rubber workers were on strike. The International Workers of the World, also known as the IWW, which was a unionizing organization, a national unionizing organization, came out to Akron to assist and help to organize a rubber union. So F.A. Seiberling was actually on vacation and had to rush back from California to Akron to help deal with the strike situation. He wrote this letter describing the events. I am sending to you some of the newspapers giving you an idea of the strike situation, which is very bad, the worst that Akron has ever known. I concluded immediately upon my return that there was no use in having a long drawn-out case of strain and suffering, and that we might as well go to the mat on the IWW proposition, first as last, and consequently issued the statement that you will find in the paper. The result has been that the fight has been wholly abandoned against all the others and has centered on us. I was on the job this morning at 5:30 with 12 policemen and 30 deputies, and although the temperature was around 20 degrees, more than 1,000 hooting strikers decorated in IWW badges and red ribbons were on hand. But the police kept them in order, keeping them off the street so that as the cars unloaded, our men could get to their work. Our production dropped from 6,500 a day to 1,200, and this morning we have in the mill room a weak spot, but 8 men out of 90 on the force. This week will determine whether the Akron mills will run or shut down, and we will either be very much on our feet next Monday morning or sealed up tight as a drum. So it was very precarious as to whether the rubber companies using workers that were coming in to kind of replace the strikers could keep the factories going. And as F.A. alludes to in his quote, he did publish an editorial in the newspaper where he basically said, we're not going to negotiate with strikers. If you'd like to come back to work, we can talk about working conditions, we can talk about wages, but while you are off the job, you will not be seen at the bargaining table. So he took a very, very firm stand against the strikers. The strike lasted almost a full month. It wasn't until the end of March that they voted to return to work. They really had not been successful in receiving any concessions. So the IWW was training people at that time to go back into work and try to talk to people about unionizing and try to do it in maybe a more peaceful situation. That really did not work out. There was not a formal union in the Akron rubber companies until the 1930s. But the strike gained national attention and actually got some notice down in Columbus, Ohio as well, where the state Congress convened a hearing to do some interviews and have people come and testify before Congress down at the state to talk about working conditions, to talk about wages, were people being treated fairly, were people given a living wage, and F.A. was actually called to testify on behalf of the Goodyear company and talk about those conditions. So almost as soon as the strike concluded, really about 2 days before March 31st, on the 28th of March, a terrible rainstorm hit most of the Midwest. And in Akron alone, they got 10 inches of rain in 4 days. And on one of those days, they got 5 inches in just 24 hours. And all across the Midwest, but especially in Ohio, Ohio seems to be the most impacted. All of the rivers swelled past their banks, and there was tremendous flooding across the state. If any of you are familiar with this historical event, Dayton, Ohio is very often the town that's most talked about with this flood. That entire town was flooded, tremendous damage. They estimated that Thousands of people were killed in the flooding because, of course, this is before any kind of warning system was available. The rising floodwaters caught a lot of people by surprise. Their houses were just swept right off of their foundations. So the Cuyahoga River and the Ohio Canal that runs through Akron both flooded their banks. The east side of Akron was the most affected, and as was Goodyear. And F.A. wrote this to his brother-in-law. Last Monday night at 8 o'clock, the powerhouse of the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company came to a halt for the first time since it was started in 1898. The water reached a height where it flowed over the grate bars and put out our fires. This morning, for the first time, all the floors on the first floor are bars covered with from 1 to 6 inches of mud, the water having risen to the height of 9 feet over our mill room floors. All the machinery being covered, likewise the entire equipment in the powerhouse. We have thousands of men at work cleaning up and are making a desperate effort to dry out our generators and cables so as to start Monday morning 6:30 on regular schedule. Akron has had its calamities in a variety of ways, but it never had one that quite equaled the flood that we have just passed through. Fortunately, the toll of the deaths so far recorded is but 6, though it's promised at one time to be much higher. We had 10 inches of rainfall in 4 days, 5 inches coming between 7 o'clock Monday morning and the same time Tuesday morning, so more than 1/4 the total annual rainfall of this state. So 2 back-to-back challenges in the spring of 1913 that really tested F.A. as a leader, as a manager of his company, and also his ability to kind of be able to pivot in the moment and make some really crucial decisions to keep his workers safe, to keep the factories running, and to make sure that Goodyear continued to be a successful business here in Akron. So thank you once again for joining me to learn more about Goodyear history. I look forward to sharing more again with you next month.